Good evening, TV Education Timor viewers. I am Dorsa Lilifania, happy gathering with us in the Voice of American program, which will provide you to the real news in which is taken factually and actually in Internasional. We announce the VOA through TV Education Timor channel, which cooperate with the Voice of America. I will accompany all of you in a few minutes with many kind of information.
Akompanha Reportajen Nasional TVE. Na kuno informação atual, factual com a política, defesa, segurança, economia, social e educação. Iha kalan tuku hitu oras Timor-Leste, no repetição iha tuku stanulu oras Timor-Leste. Iha dader tuku hitu oras Timor-Leste, repetição iha tuku stanulu rasinrua 5 minuto tolunulu oras Timor-Leste. Acompanhamos reportagem internacional, desporto nacional no internacional. Televisão Educação Timor, sem inspiração, para futuro.
United States political powers shift west and south with population over the past 10 years are causing an important reshuffling of the number of Congress. Stay ready for Voice of America.
Reapportionment is the process that decides how seats in the House of Representatives get parceled out to the 50 states. It is done every 10 years after the decennial U.S. Census results are tallied. The 2020 population count has been crunched a bit late because of the pandemic. 7 states, California, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York, will lose 1 seat from their congressional delegations. Oregon, Montana, Colorado, North Carolina, and Florida all gain 1 congressional seat, while Texas gains 2.
These are states that have been growing in population, and as people continue to shift westward physically from the East Coast, have increased their political power and influence over the last century.
Jacob Rubashkin is a reporter and analyst for Inside Elections, a nonpartisan political analysis site.
The Supreme Court has held that congressional districts need to be as close to equal in population to each other within every state. And that really means as close to possible. We're talking about states try and get between 1 to 2 people difference.
Redistricting has other rules to prevent something called gerrymandering, drawing election district lines to benefit a particular political party.
Districts have to be contiguous. You can't have a district start in one place and be interrupted and then magically reappear on the other side of the state. There's also Federal Voting Rights Act considerations. Districts have to provide the opportunity for minority populations to be represented by someone from their own community.
Power to redraw district lines rests mostly with state legislatures. Republicans control most of the 50 state legislatures, including 3 states gaining seats, lifting hopes they can win back the House of Representatives in 2022.
So as much as we can learn from the reapportionment process that we've just undergone, there are still so many questions left to be answered before we have a really complete sense of what the 2022 midterms are going to look like.
Steve Reddish, VOA News, Washington.
Women journalists face a challenge amid COVID pandemic. In addition to introduction restrictions to curb spread of coronavirus, some government took measures to control reporter storylines. Mariama Diallo for Voice of America.
The lockdown that began in March 2020 were key strategies used around the world to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic.
As you know, journalists have to be on the front line and they have to be out there to be able to report. I think in the early March, we saw this complete sort of huge challenge where women journalists, especially freelancers, were facing this challenge of finding a job to be able to do.
As the pandemic took a toll on lives, governments took drastic measures, including closing borders and imposing quarantines to protect medical systems from being strained. But some of them also tried to control the storyline, she says.
We saw this in Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt, some of these countries, China, Pakistan, some of these countries use the opportunity of COVID-19 into politicizing the issue and creating misinformation about journalists who had been trying to do their job.
How so? She explains.
This has happened in Pakistan. I'll give you an example of one of our members, Asma Shirazi. Whenever she is reporting on the spread of the virus, government inefficiencies, or whatever the government should be doing and they aren't doing, she's targeted with misinformation campaigns. We have several other similar incidents where women journalists have been impeded after reporting on COVID-19 in particular.
In Turkey, journalist Ebru Kucukaydin was taken into custody after one of her coronavirus reports and later released. The Turkish government accused her of creating panic. Other journalists, Malaysia's award-winning Wan Nur Hayati and The Guardian's Cairo correspondent Ruth Michelson, faced charges or were expelled or harassed for their coverage of the pandemic, the coalition says. Last year, the International Federation of Journalists surveyed nearly 560 female reporters from 52 countries and found that stress increased for 77% since the pandemic began. Catherine Gicheru leads the Africa Women Journalism Project in Kenya, an initiative started by the International Center for Journalists. She's seen the negative effects the pandemic has had on some women journalists in countries where gender discrimination is widespread.
This I have reports also from the fellows in Tanzania and in Uganda as well as in Nigeria, is the fact that if you have to work from home, then you're the one who's also taking care of the family. And that's 2, 3, 4 times the job that a woman journalist was previously doing, and that is across the board. So you have the mental anxiety, the stresses, the fears that everybody has, but much more for women, especially women journalists.
She also says women journalists have been hit with job losses.
It's a problem all over the world, but a lot of journalists have lost their jobs. The women, a lot of them, especially in Kenya, are either on contract terms or are freelancers. And the fact that they've lost they've either been laid off or they've been put on half pay, it means the situation has become even more difficult.
And she says it has had an impact on coverage of other women-related topics, including sexual health, obstetric fistula, and female genital mutilation. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
United States President Joe Biden travels to Georgia, a state that secured his legislative ambition. The U.S. President thought his 10-day achievement pushed for voting reform. Pasti Vidaksuwara for Voice of America.
A campaign-style drive-in rally near Atlanta, Georgia, is how President Joe Biden celebrated his first 100 days in office. The state gave Democrats 2 crucial Senate seats in January, giving them a slim majority in the chamber and the ability to push the president's agenda.
And I want to stop here and give thanks to both your senators, Senators Ossoff and Warnock, for making it happen, because those 2 votes, had we not come back and you elected them, those 2 votes made the difference.
Biden highlighted his administration's achievements, including a vaccination campaign that has delivered 240 million doses and an economy that grew at 6.4% pace in the first quarter. He again pitched his $1.8 trillion American Families Plan to expand education and childcare, financed partly through increasing taxes on wealthy Americans, and the $2.3 trillion infrastructure package he announced in March, calling it a blue-collar blueprint to build America.
He was trying to win back some of those first-time voters or some people who've left the Democratic Party because of losing jobs and losing opportunities in areas, particularly some of the Rust Belt states, which really helped the key to victory in 2016 for Donald Trump.
A Reuters Ipsos poll shows 55% of Americans approve of Biden's performance in office, with the highest mark, 65%, for his handling of the pandemic. 52% support Biden's handling of the economy, but only 42% approve of his immigration policy, particularly with the surge of child migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border that has opened Biden to attacks from his own party and from Republicans.
Weakening our southern borders and creating a crisis is not compassionate.
Biden has sent an immigration bill to Congress, but it's unlikely to pass. He has asked Vice President Kamala Harris to lead U.S. efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, to address what the administration calls the root causes of migration, including poverty and gang violence.
If the United States can't figure out a way to help other countries in the Western Hemisphere be more stable and deal with what is this, narco-terroristic regime, if they can't figure out how to make this better in the long run with our fellow Western Hemispheric countries, this will be a problem with us forever.
Biden's rally came on the heels of a new law in Georgia that Democrats say is designed to suppress the votes of minorities.
It's just wrong. And it's why we have to pass the voting rights protection laws coming through the Congress right now.
This week, the President and First Lady, Vice President, and the Second Gentleman will continue their nationwide campaign-style blitz to promote the administration's achievements in its first 100 days. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
As the United States withdraw troops, Afghanistan urges Pakistan to stop supporting Taliban. Afghan government say it's time for Pakistan to stop supporting. Rahim Gul Sarwan for Voice of America.
دغه د وخت د انتخاب ته که غواړې د دې خاورې دښمني واخلې انتخاب وکړه که غواړې د خاورې سره دوستي وکړې او په سلها کالو کې دوست پاتې سو دغه وخت
بهترین اساسی تصویر برعکس
United States President Joe Biden first 100 days see few big moves in Africa. Continent see a few important gestures in administration early days.
U.S. President Joe Biden has focused most of his energy in his first 100 days in office on taming the pandemic on home soil. In this short, frantic period, though, he has made a few important gestures that have been welcomed in Africa. On his first day in office, he halted the U.S. plan to exit the World Health Organization. Biden's reversal of predecessor Donald Trump's controversial decision to withdraw from the global body was greeted with near universal approval, especially from African health experts, who said this could portend a more equitable world order. Biden also pledged an additional $2 billion to the COVAX facility, which aims to provide equitable vaccine access to poorer nations. And then, on day 90, April 20th, he spoke words that echoed across the ocean.
We can't leave this moment or look away thinking our work is done. We have to look at it, we have to look as we did for those 9 minutes and 29 seconds. We have to listen. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Those are George Floyd's last words. We can't let those words die with him. We have to keep hearing those words.
George Floyd, an African American, was born in Houston and murdered in Minneapolis. But the African continent watched keenly as a jury handed a guilty verdict to his killer, ex-policeman Derek Chauvin. Floyd's slow suffocation under Chauvin's knee, which led to his death, was a linchpin for protests and calls for police reform in the United States. African analysts such as Asanda Gwasheng, a Cape Town-based diversity trainer and gender and race scholar, welcomed Biden's admission that the U.S. has a racial justice problem. South Africa is also struggling to overcome its own racial justice issues after centuries of colonialism and the brutal, racist apartheid regime. She also said Vice President Kamala Harris's status as a powerful black female leader lends weight to Biden's desire to address racial justice, but said she wants to see more from the administration and from American institutions.
We praise Kamala, and I think it's great that we praise her, but people of color in institutionally racist institutions very rarely are able to make any change. And so unless and until we deal with the systems and the structures that keep prejudice in place, we are not going to see many changes in the United States and globally. And so yay and great for America and Biden, but can we please talk about the institutional change that they are going to make?
Johannesburg-based commentator Brooks Spector said that while Biden hasn't made any big changes to Africa policy, the fact that he isn't making radical, impulsive changes, as critics accuse Trump of doing, is a welcome change in itself. Spector recommends that Biden work to strengthen and maintain the African Growth and Opportunities Act, a U.S. trade program.
Much of what has to happen is going to be demonstrated by doing things on the ground in a slow, steady, consistent pattern rather than these hectic policy changes of chopping and changing. If you want to demonstrate your support for economic growth on the continent, then you carry out the policies that encourage economic growth.
Spector, who served as an American diplomat overseas for several decades, says time will tell on Biden's impact on Africa. Presidential legacies, he said, are built over years, not days, even 100 of them. Anita Pell, VOA News.
Akompanha Reportajen Nasional TVE. Na kuno informação atual, factual com a política, defesa, segurança, economia, social e educação. Iha kalam tuku hitu oras Timor-Leste, no repetição iha tuku stanulu oras Timor-Leste. Iha dader tuku hitu oras Timor-Leste, repetição iha tuku stanulu rasin rua 5 minuto tolonulu oras Timor-Leste. Acompanhamos reportagem internacional, desporto nacional no internacional. Televisão Educação Timor, sem inspiração, ba futuro.
TV Education Timor viewers, those the news I could present to you, and if you have some suggestion, please call us on the number below. TV Education Timor is the future inspiration. Finally, I'm Dorseli Lifania and all crew of VOA and TV Education Timor say have a wonderful day. See you next time.
Playlist. A mim se apresenta vai ter música, videoclipe, o título Oi Oi. espera saya nimai tawot sira ia tempo serviço no descansa. Playlist ia de canal TVE, sa inspiração ba futuro.
Notícia oi usia área oi. Mas bem, ita precisa fokus. Atau simo informação los no credible. Acompanha programa Fokus. Fokus puso o Fokus Satan. Começa segunda-feira to sexta-feira. Tuku sia to tuku senulo racing ida. Live ia canal TVE. Sa inspiração ba futuro.